All right, we are live with doctors Nastia and Shilo. Welcome to Grimerica. You guys are from the Demystify podcast. We're super excited to talk to you. You've kind of invigorated my interest in science.
Hell yeah!
Just from like listening a little bit, I'm like, I was a little skeptical at first. I'm like, okay, well, who are these two? I should know them. I thought I've heard about you guys before, but then listening to you, I'm like, wow, this is going to be fantastic to chat. So thank you for joining us.
For sure. Yeah, it's the DemystifySci podcast. It's a little project we've been at for several years. Started off writing for magazines and then doing some blogging. And honestly, the interviews we were doing for all that journalism stuff turned out to be way more interesting than what we were making out of it. So yeah,
right.
That's a big part of what we do now.
That's one thing I didn't know. I didn't hear while researching you is your sort of genesis story or your like journey from becoming, doctors or in academia to like just podcasting about it. Do you want to both just give us a quick sort of synopsis of that?
Really quickly before we do that, is the camera blinking in and out for you?
Yeah, something's blinking. Yeah.
Something is blinking.
What's blinking? I didn't notice shit, so.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's screen is kind of blinking in and out.
There was some glitching, but everything seems fine over in Starlink land.
All right.
Darren's frequency is matching it's resonant with the blinking.
Perfect. Well, so the genesis of it was that Shilo and I were both doing super technical stuff. Shilo was studying biophysics. Should we try to fix this?
Yeah, blinking. Yeah, it might. It seems like it's increasing in frequency.
Let me see what is happening. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No rush.
No, I can see OBS is blinking. Hold on.
Okay. Screens are blinking too.
I don't think it's ours. I think I saw yours blinking, but yeah.
Okay.
Not sure.
1 second.
Yeah, no problem. We're having StreamYard issues too.
StreamYard.
These days.
I mean, it doesn't seem to depend on whether I'm talking or not.
Okay.
At first glance, I can't find a good alternative, though. Or there's really no alternative. I mean, otherwise it's OBS, which is a piece of shit too. So I mean, it's just like pick your fucking train wreck.
It's true.
It's free though.
Yeah, free stuff is you get what you pay for.
I paid for the $1,000 Wirecast. We had it all. It was $750 US for this thing, and it was just as useless. I remember because it was like a 90-day thing, and I was like, within like 30 days, I was like, I want my money back. I don't OBS. It was like OBS with a few more features, but more glitchy for sure.
Oh no, that's hard to imagine. It seems like we fixed it.
Yeah.
Well, how about what? Do you think it's because the teleprompter's off the stage? What if I put that back? You think that might make a difference?
I don't think so. Let me restart OBS, and maybe that'll fix it.
Okay, cool.
So we're gonna vanish for a little bit.
Okay, no problem.
If I switch it to that view, it doesn't show the teleprompter anyway.
That's interesting. Hey, well, that would be better. Then we have us as small little frames and them as the big one.
Well, you stay the same size.
Big glitchy one.
The big glitchy one, yeah, exactly. Okay, I think that I don't know. Maybe that fixed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've never used StreamYard before, so maybe it just doesn't like our version.
Oh, what browser are you using it from?
From Chrome. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, that should be.
Yeah, Brave did not work for our audio interface. But I don't know.
Maybe that's what our problem is, Darren. Maybe we should be back to trying to use Chrome for this StreamYard.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
All right.
Well, let's try and do a podcast.
All right, let's do it. So the question was, how did we get into this? Do you want to give the spiel?
You were technical. You were very technical.
Yeah, well, we were nerds for a long time. It's still glitching. Oh, what are you gonna do? I don't know. Do you guys want to just roll through it, or
let's just roll through it?
Let's just roll through it.
Yeah. Sorry, audience.
No, it might be. It's probably our fault, but
it's all good. Geez, yeah. How do I say where to begin? I mean, we were deep nerds. I think we were interested in a lot of different things, though. We were doing all sorts of different art projects along the way too. But I think we thought that if we climbed up that ivory tower, somebody would have the answers to things that we'd been asking questions about since we were little kids and knowing our parents and stuff. Like, how does gravity work? How does light work? And they're just like, well, wait till you're older and you learn some differential equations or something. And we were just never, I don't know, we just found that when we finally got to meet our heroes, it was a bit of a letdown. You know, there are a lot of problems outstanding where instead of, you know, the mysteries being admitted to, it's often covered up with equations and math, which neatly describe the problem, but they don't really offer an explanation for what's happening behind the scenes. And so the project kind of emerged out of our own quest to find answers for a lot of these basic things in the world. Like I said, like, how does electricity work? How does a magnet work? You know, very basic stuff. And we've had some incredible conversations over the years that have gotten us a lot closer to understanding that stuff.
And just in general, I think that when you come up in science, I don't know if this is the experience that you guys have had, but it's almost presented as a given that everything is already figured out, and that the job of whoever goes into science is going to be to just push whatever paradigms are already popular just a little bit into greater detail. And we kind of started to realize that there's this whole world of ideas and theories and proposals for how nature operated that nobody was really talking about. And that was what we were super passionate about, which was, man, we could just collect theories.
That's what I love about, like, when I started listening to your show, I was like, this is like amazing. They're talking to these scientists, real scientists, talking to real scientists, but with an open dialogue and an open mind, and talking about this theory doesn't work, but this one might, and this one won't. And we've approached this from completely different sides. So we've come from the phenomenology, right? Like, I had experiences that I couldn't explain, and I was like, what is going on here? And then I started hearing from all these other people that have had these experiences, and I'm like, it's not what they're telling us. They're not acknowledging the mystery, which pissed me off. Like, I wanted UFO disclosure, but I didn't care if the government told me, but I just wanted an acknowledgement of the mystery. Like, this needs more research and more study. And now, like, we've come so far. I mean, in this like 11, 12 years that we've been doing the podcast, it's like, it's blown wide open. But we've also had these people, like scientists on, like similar ones that you've had on. And I feel like there's a theme that I really want to talk to you about tonight, which would be around, I don't know if you'd call it like astrophysics or cosmology or earth sciences, but we've had guys on like Douglas Vogt and you mentioned Simon Shack, but other ones that are sort of more catastrophists. And I'm like, sort of where I'm at right now is, and you talked to that scientist about the Earth plate tectonics and all that, right? And so, and you're sort of picking apart some of this stuff too, but I feel like I didn't want to jump into this so quickly, but there's some cataclysmic, there's an increase in this talk about cataclysms, and we're kind of right in there with Randall Carlson and trying to talk about like lost civilizations like Atlantis and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of science around cataclysm that's not being acknowledged. So that's kind of where we've come to this from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a preference for not having cataclysms, I think.
Yes, that's I didn't want to get too conspiratorial right away, but they need the uniformitarianism, right? They need to say that we have this like the steady sort of problem with climate change and with what we're doing to the earth and all that. And I'm not saying we're not having an effect. Of course we have an effect, but when they don't want this like this instant cataclysm. So there's some deeper questions I want to ask you about that. But in general, I felt like I watched your episode with Dr. Ann Hoffmeister, and I felt like, is that episode a representation of your overall podcast? Like, would that be fair to say, like, that's and I was thinking, I bet you this is like a really good representation of your podcast in general and some of the other chats you've had with other scientists.
I mean, she's one half of what we do, right? So she's from the academy. She's at the end of a long, illustrious career, and she's kind of stepped outside of the Overton window of what you're supposed to be accepting as given in a lot of the disciplines that she examines. So that's one type of person we have. We also have people completely outside of the academy who just have really cool ideas that we want to pick their brain about. Honestly, we brought her on the show in large part to discuss the fact that she had touched on a an observation about the sun, which we are obsessed about, which is at the heart of all of astrophysics and cosmology. And so she had essentially mentioned in a paper that one of our patrons had brought to our attention that she had modeled the surface of the sun as a liquid, essentially. And, that's really revolutionary. There's actually a long history of people treating the stars as if they're liquids, especially if you go back into the 19th, 18th centuries. And you might think it's just kind of arbitrary, like it doesn't, like who cares or whatever. The fact of the matter is that if the stars have a different material basis than this kind of gaseous nebulous plasma story that we get, the big burning ball of gas, if that is the case, then it means we're going about a number of things wrong technologically, especially fusion, right? It means there's probably a different approach to fusion that is not the one you hear about in the headlines where fusion's always 10 years around the corner, that kind of thing. It also undermines a lot of the stories we tell about the stars, right? Because liquids are incompressible by definition. So you essentially end up with situations where you don't have these ultra compact objects like black holes and white dwarfs. You have to tell a different story of what those lights in the sky mean. You have to interpret that data very, very differently. So everything the whole story you tell of the cosmos becomes a very different matter. And so she actually mentioned this in her paper, and she was the first academic that I'd ever seen mention it. There is a different scientist who's left the academy who's developed that theory for the last 20 years. But he's very much outside of the cool kids club for the academics. And so, so Anne has lots of cool ideas. The one that drew us to her was this liquid sun idea, which we think is absolutely critical, and it's going to flip the lid on so many things in the next century.
But in terms of the podcast overall, like we look for people, she is very representative. When we found her, it was like, wow, we found someone who's totally our people. She looks at things that everybody else comes up with these crazy explanations, right? So dark matter in galaxies that causes them to look the way that they do, that the universe is mostly made of things that you can't detect, but that are creating these crazy phenomena. And she kind of looks at it and she's like, I don't think that's true. I think that there's actually a much simpler explanation. And I think you guys are all crazy. And so as like a general thesis, that's kind of what we have.
Well, is there any other overarching narrative changing things that you guys have sort of come to conclusions on? Like, for example, like the liquid of the sun or anything else solar or anything else with our celestial mechanics, anything else that like you've come down this path over the last few years and you're going like, I'm kind of leaning over here now, which I never thought I would be. Is there anything examples of that?
Well, there's like some really crazy biology stuff, some consciousness stuff that I think is really interesting. But it really is kind of at that intersection of astrophysics and cosmology. Like with consciousness, have you guys come across the hard problem of consciousness?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, so the question is, everybody walks around and philosophers for decades have been like, where does human consciousness come from? It's so strange that humans have consciousness and, cats and dogs don't. And most people that you talk to are like that. They're like, humans are doing something that's totally different from anybody else. And we have this hugely complex philosophical question of like, where did humans start to think? And you look around at the world and you're like, dude, I'm pretty sure everybody's thinking. Like, this is an insane problem. And you talk to just person after person who like really seriously have devoted decades of study to this question. And I'm like, this is such a misguided approach that leads you to this place where, the universe is made out of consciousness and nothing is real and we live in a simulation. And I'm like, I mean, you can think that. I think that you can tell that story, but I think that there's other stories to tell. And that's kind of what we've done there. And with the astrophysics and the cosmology stuff, I mean, Simon Schack's theory was really interesting. I don't think he's right, but I do think that it's really interesting. I'm sorry, Simon. I've told him that in person many times.
I thought that the Dr. Anne Hofmeister actually, when she was talking about the Berry Center and some of our solar celestial mechanics, I thought she was almost going there for a sec. I didn't know if there was some overlapping there between her theory and Simon's.
Well, Well, Simon's theory is really interesting because I've been trying to figure out if it's just a mathematical transformation that is like I have this thought that you could
Maybe just tell people what it is really quick.
Yeah, so Simon Schach's theory is revitalizing this solar system theory by Tycho Brahe, who was one of the first astronomers. And the idea is that it's not that the entire system orbits around the sun.
Definitely not one of the first astronomers, but he produced an enormous star catalog for sure. He was a rich
really
baron.
early astronomer, wasn't he?
I mean, people were astronomers.
Okay, fine.
back
Like
in
the Sumerians were. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. But he basically was like, I think the Earth is at the center and everything rotates around it. And so we have, you see the Ptolemaic orbits where they have that kind of like spirograph shape. They're called trochoidal orbits. And Simon basically plugged all of the data into this massive simulator, and he shows that the trochoidal orbital pattern works perfectly well from the vantage point of the Earth. And you can recreate the entire solar system with the Earth with a very slow year-long orbit at the center. But it's going like a mile an hour as opposed to, tens of thousands of miles an hour.
Where the sun and Mars are actually the centers of the orbital system. It's a binary system where the sun and Mars are the two focal points.
And so everything basically just kind of like orbits around them, and they orbit around the Earth, and there you have the system. And I've tried to get to the bottom of this, but I'm like, the reason that we had that system in the first place is when you stand on Earth and you look, everything looks like it orbits the Earth, right? Like just by its very nature, like the sun looks like it goes around the Earth, all the planets look like they go around. And so it's really easy to say, well, clearly that's because the Earth is at the center.
It's like worth pointing out that system we call the Ptolemaic system or the geocentric system, it's really, really accurate. It's really predictive. The models that they had for, the first millennium were totally legit, and all the way up to the Renaissance, like they do predict all of the things that you would expect out of any solar system models. So that really exposes a really interesting feature of science, which is that you can have two different representations that are equally accurate. They can't both be right, but just because your equations are predictive doesn't mean that you understand what's going on necessarily.
That's right. I would argue that the Tycho system does a better job of explaining it in several aspects.
Like the comets, right?
Well, not just the comets. There's like the Mars lunar alignment that Kepler had to average out that he doesn't talk about. So it's not the set days. I can't tell you the days off the top of my head, but it's in the book. I got the book, but it's the Kepler just averaged that shit out, and it's
like 77774 or
something like that, which makes sense in the trinary system. So I couldn't tell you the page number off the top of my head, but yeah, I went through the whole Tycho's thing trying to disprove it, and at the end of it, I came out saying this is doing a better job of explaining it than everything I've learned. Especially when you start looking at the retrogrades and the parallax stuff. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in there that you think you can explain out of hand, and then you just can't. I've been going down this rabbit hole for 3 years trying to get rid of it, and
you have to be willing to relinquish the idea of mass, right? The idea that we've measured the mass of the planets, which is troublesome, right? So, there's been many satellite experiments, like let's just say robotic explorers to different planetary systems in our solar system, which have gauged the mass by their orbital dynamics. And so Simon kind of throws out all of this information, right? He doesn't believe NASA's been to any of these places, from what I understand, which I'm like, fair enough. Like I understand why you're suspicious, right? We can get into that if you want, but
you don't even
have to relinquish that. That's all.
It doesn't have to be completely conspiratorial. I mean, there is just the aspect that the fucking robot that flew past the planet isn't quite as good at doing what they think it can do when it flies past the planet as they think it can, because it starts to get weird. I mean, I can look at NASA and think there's probably some bullshit there, but I think that hubris can just play a huge part in that as well. I think that the other part that really resonates is the 1 mile an hour, because it is like, to be looking at just the same stars that that it seems like everyone's been looking at for the last 100,000 years, and we're flying through space at 90,000 miles an hour, and everything else is, so it's all going at the exact same speed as us, and nothing's running into anything, or it just seems like some stuff would have started to go awry by now. Even not, I mean, we're talking about just the cosmos, just in the solar system, something should have gone wonky. It's just like the fact that you're going to tell me that everything's just going at the perfect speed so that it never falls out of the sun and it never comes in. At a minimum, something's holding this shit in place. Like the Earth isn't going into the sun, and it's not flying away from the sun because it can't. It's not.
It could be a selective thing, right? Too, where just there were a lot of other planets around here at some point too, and they didn't make it. Something like that, where they were either cast off or they got eaten by the sun. Maybe we had another sun at some point. We're one of the only solar systems that doesn't appear to have a binary partner. That's pretty weird.
I was just going to mention that the sheer amount of binary systems that's not really, it's acknowledged, but it's not really talked about.
It seems like it's every one. I mean, the more you look at it, it starts to seem like it's almost every single one, if you look close enough, has some sort of binary partner. And it doesn't seem like the binary partners need to be as big as we thought they did. I think if you even just look at the serious ones, it's something like 210 to 1.
That stuff gets really weird because the size is very difficult to project.
Well, it starts saying like, so if Sirius can be in a binary system with something that's 209 times or whatever it is times smaller than it, and our explanation is just, well, it has to be more massive then. Well, we can't send a probe there. So I mean, we were just talking about the problems with black holes and stuff like that. I mean, when you can start saying that something that's that much bigger has that much more mass, it starts to be problematic, in my opinion. At least it seems like, well,
this is where like the liquid thing actually starts to really matter too, because one of the things that, right, so why do they say that the thing is small, right? It's because it's not very bright, is what it comes down to. It appears to have orbital dynamics that should make it massive, but it's not very bright. And with a gaseous model of the star, it's true that the brightness should tell you the radius, but that same equation that gives you the size of the star, it also, for any other material, you have to actually consider the properties of the material. So something like, say, diamonds, right? Diamonds are made out of pure carbon, but so is graphene or soot, right? They're very, very different optical properties. So graphene or soot is completely opaque, right? You can't see through it. Diamonds, they're just carbon also. They're just in a different lattice crystal structure than soot. So the carbons are arranged into these kind of cubes in diamonds. And inside of soot, they're in these nice little hexagonal planar structures. And you get very different optical properties. In other words, the soot would have this signature that would give it a much, much brighter appearance, right? If it was heated to the same temperature as the diamond. And so if the stars actually have material properties, then you have a case where those little dwarf, in this case, the white dwarf in Sirius, it could be a huge star. It's just not very optically active, right? It has a lot of transparency to it, so it doesn't give the appearance of having a very large radius, because again, radius comes from brightness. So there's a lot of weird factors about dwarf stars that I think are going to change radically in the next century.
And didn't Anne talk about that as well? Wasn't she talking about how the black holes really are not there, and that the galaxies, the way the galaxies move and are not based on, or what did, you'll have to articulate it for me, but it was something about the way solar systems and galaxies work that didn't seem to be acknowledged.
She had a really crazy idea about the black holes. She was just like, I think stars could just be different shapes too. Like, especially, do you remember that? She was like toroidal stars or something.
Oh yeah, she was talking.
That was pretty far out.
Well, her thing about galaxies is really interesting because it's basically just a mathematical retreatment of them. And I don't tend to like mathematical arguments because I find them to be less inspiring than like physical models. But she's basically like, look, Newtonian mechanics works really well for things that are spherical. So if you have a spherical system that's basically uniform, then it'll behave in a specific way because of the shape of the system and the symmetry of it. But galaxies aren't spherical. And so we're asking for them to behave according to spherical dynamics. But we can look at them and we can see that they're not shaped right. And so we have to modify the way that we treat it mathematically. And if we modify it how we treat it mathematically, then they're no longer super mysterious objects that must be filled with dark matter in order to make them spin at the appropriate rate. It's just
like I think most people don't realize that the solar system's treated as a sphere because most of the mass is in the sun. And so they're trying to do the same thing with the galaxy. That's why they have to plug all this spherical dark matter into it. And she's like, that's just crazy. The thing's obviously not a sphere. It's a disk, and disks have different mass distribution, and you need different treatments mathematically for them.
And it was all one, like it was all moving as one. The way she explained it was all together as one sort of one piece in a way, right? That it wasn't
much more so than like planets going around, a star, right? Which is kind of this, the ones interiorly go really, really fast. It's much more uniform in the galaxy.
I feel sometimes like we're kind of heartbreakers because we show up and we're like, all that weird, crazy stuff, it's probably not there.
What weird? I don't know. I think it's the opposite.
In what sense?
Well, the dark matter and that's the weird, crazy stuff that's not there.
Yeah, exactly. We're saying that like all that
people love that stuff.
Yeah, they love it. Like
Yeah.
Shilo teaches astrophysics and the kids love that stuff.
Like I could walk them through 20 different alternative explanations for, these exotic black holes or white dwarfs or something. And, kids will follow it. They'll ask questions. So I know they're following it. And then they'll still just be like, yeah, but what if there was a black hole? Like how long, what would your life be like inside of, like people just love that stuff so much. So yeah, that's what Nasi means when we're breaking hearts sometimes.
Have you guys?
I think part of the problem is that we're clearly being lied to, across the board. It's like, and we don't even have to do it on climate change, right? Because maybe we can argue that the science ain't in on that at a minimum. I wouldn't take that. I think the science is in, and I don't agree with it. But let's not even go with that one. I mean, we can just go with like we were talking about before, with cataclysm, with lost civilization. I mean, it's like, are you going to tell me that none of these guys have figured out by nothing that there was some crazy fucking stone technique? I mean, is it really Ben Van Kerkwyk and Graham Hancock and the Snake Bros? These are the guys that are and Jimmy Corsetti. I mean, Joe Rogan. These are the guys that are literally on the cutting edge of the lost civilization. And Flint Dibble's freaking the fuck out. But what is he bringing to the table? He's bringing bullshit, and he's getting proven to be lying to defend things. And you know what? I had a little crush on Flint Dibble for a little while there. I was like, I was the one who was. I was like, they could have a little TV show together where they just kind of go around arguing about stuff, and maybe in the end become friends. But then he just turned into a real piece of shit in the end about a bunch of it. But anyway, that's a tangent.
Something crazy happened in the back half of the 20th century for the first time, where science became an important part of the state crafting narrative. And I don't think we ever saw that before, right? We always had the church or religion or something that was kind of the metaphysical cosmic pillar of telling people their place in the universe. And science kind of took on that job at some point, I think right after World War II, where people began having careers in science. It was getting state funding out the wazoo. And so it became like, in some sense, like the stories that are told, like the monolithic one single narrative stories that are told, they're kind of the Bible of our times in a way. Like the priest class is the people who perpetuate those stories and, repair them when the evidence doesn't align to them properly.
It's
and so,
more pervasive. It's way more pervasive because at least the Bible had some fucking competition in different corners of the world. This new scientism is just, it's taken over the place, and it's like we can't. And now it's to the point where it's like, we're not going to talk about it here, but we just go through from COVID to global warming to.
Hey, I'm down to do all that stuff since it's your podcast. We'll usually get kicked off YouTube for that stuff.
Oh, we will too. And we're just we're 4 days away from being out of YouTube jail. So, but all these sorts of things take place, and it's like, I was already on sketchy terms. I mean, look, I came into the podcast as the skeptic, as the space guy. Obviously not a scientist. I didn't have credentials, anything like you guys do. I don't have any fucking credentials, but I had watched all the documentaries and read all the books, and I was firmly based in that sort of world. And already by like episode 150, I'm starting to really question plate tectonics and things like that, and is Earth dynamics, how that's working. And you go through COVID and you go through, there's we could go through a million things that sort of happen on the way where it's like, I can't trust your science one bit. I mean, the life of the podcast, we've already supposed to have a climate extinction just in the life of the podcast. It was supposed to be over once, maybe twice since we've started the show. And then, obviously the big one was COVID, where it's like, we can't, what can we trust? What level of this can we trust? And then in your department, we got blowjobs like Neil deGrasse Tyson that are stepping out of their lane all over the place. And it's not even that he's stepping out of his lane. It's that there's a level of ignorance to even entertain these different ideas that clearly have some standing. They might not be there. And if he really thought about it, he might be able to give a well thought out reason as to why, but he doesn't want to, or he can't, or he's just some political piece. He doesn't seem to be real. And then we got these guys like Bill Nye being crammed down our throat. And it's like, what is going on? How can
we have evidence that the CIA is they classified Chan Thomas's book, The Adam and Eve Story. I don't know if you guys know about that one, but I mean, they talked about they built that he built that book on Charles Hapgood's Earth crust displacement, and he talks about a cataclysm that happens every 6,500 years, 6,000 to 6,500 years, and the CIA just declassified it in 2013, so that caused this big uproar. But it kind of fits into all these sort of like pole shift type things, and the Douglas vote stuff, the cataclysmic stuff, the Douglas vote stuff. He thinks there's a micronova, and in 2046, it was going to happen. And the U.S. government in Bill 4488 talked about human extinction like 17 times in there, and he thinks it's based on his work about the actual pole shift that's going to happen after the micronova. So there's on one hand, R.I.P. Doug. I mean, I don't know what happened. He died last year, I think. But there's all these other like cataclysmic geomagnetic reversals, the true polar wander, like the pole is wandering faster. There's all kinds of evidence. So I don't even know, where am I going with this? It's like, I have a question, but just to build on what Darren was saying, it's been censored. So going back decades and decades.
And so, like, who goes to work the next day? Like, if you really genuinely, to the core of your being, believe that this can all fall apart tomorrow, like, you can't keep living a normal life. Like, you can't keep going to work. You can't keep drawing a salary. You can't keep going to the grocery store. Like, you have to be moving into the mountains and farming a plot of land and making sure that you're inside of some self-sufficient community in order to survive, because the alternative is literally extinction. And
but who gives them the authority, like the CIA especially? I mean, why are they involved in all that, right?
Well,
I mean,
it's non-governmental. If we're talking about scientists, who gives them the authority to
I guess I'd rather work on building an infrastructure to stop cometary impact or something than the made up sort of like man-made climate change narrative. I mean, they're obviously grifting trillions from us, for some reason, while they can, and whether it's, I guess I just hate living under the lie of it all, right? I'd rather like, hey, we're going to go through a cataclysm every 6,500 years as per the evidence, and we got to get ready for it. I mean, that might be like magical thinking on my part, but you guys think it should be censored then, or if that was the truth?
A lot of like panic control for sure. Can I tell like an interesting anecdote of this? So
about the question of censorship, I think you should tell the anecdote, but the censorship, I don't think it should be censored. I like understanding the chain of events that leads things to look the way that they are, because I think that it lets me not feel like overwhelmingly angry. I'm like, if I can understand why it is a certain way, then I can try to fix that, as opposed to just being mad about the fact that it sucks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and there is a logic. I mean, I guess you could think there's a logical reason. I mean, they don't want people to know. They don't want people to freak out. I mean, it's the same reason supposedly they didn't tell us about UFOs or whatever too, right? We weren't ready for it. So
Yeah, and I don't think that most people are evil. Like, I meet a lot of people and I talk to them, and maybe I kind of believe that you can look at somebody's face and you can see if they have like a deep darkness inside of them. Right? There's a little bit of physiognomy in there, but I don't think that most people want to do harm. I think that most people have value structures where even somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I mean, he was Carl Sagan's student. Right, these are sacred cows that you expect people to defect on, and I think that that's really difficult and painful. And I think that it's easier to help them see that perhaps there are better reasons to see things differently than it is to just, stand there and be like, "Well, defect already. Like, clearly it's dumb." And it's like, "Well, it is dumb." But they have all these really complex value structures that lead them to hold on to these things.
Regarding the crush shift thing, so there was this experiment, or there was a phenomenon that was noted by the Russians when they were first up in space doing these low Earth space station missions. I don't know if you guys have seen this video, but if you take a wing nut and you untwist it like in low Earth orbit, so you have basically this lopsided screw that flies off of it's a bolt that flies out
It's
of
like a wing nut.
It's like a wing nut. I don't know how
Yeah.
to describe this. So it flies off. What happens is that since the thing is actually lopsided, as it spins coming off of its attachment point, it inverts periodically. So the wing nut will just flip over and then it'll flip over. And you can just watch videos of this on the ISS. And the Russians discovered this and they sat on it for 10 years without telling anybody because they were deeply concerned that that was what happened to the Earth periodically. And they didn't want to incite mass pandemonium. And eventually, I guess, story goes that a bunch of their scientists cranked the numbers and decided it wouldn't happen to Earth because it wasn't lopsided enough. But it does feed into the whole Hapgood thing, and it kind of explains the mentality behind the people that are maybe discovering things that they don't really want to share with the general public,
That's
Yeah,
the
because
effect,
the
that's the effect that
Debbie
you talked
Jankov.
about in your video, Darren, with
Yeah,
ethical.
the Debbie Jankov effect or whatever. I don't know how to speak Russian, so I don't know.
Zhebenikov.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the thing that does sort of resemble that wing nut is the core of the Earth. That's sort of that's what this what does he call it now? The
core mantle decoupling.
Core mantle decoupling. So it's not so much a crush shift. It's that the core goes the actual center decouples from the mantle and goes the other way, and then there's like a correction that sort of takes place. And man, he's got a video where they're spinning a T handle and the T handle spins, and then he like puts that up against. I'll send you guys the paper. That's like 180-page paper that he's put out on this thing with all the this and the that. And I mean, it gets a little wild at times where it's like this is where it gets into what the pyramid is for. So he thinks that the shafts in the pyramid are to right now the one's pointing to north, and then when it goes through the switch, it's pointing to the other north, because that, there's some crazy things about the Great Pyramid. It's made right in the middle of the landmass of that huge continent. It's like the center. So, and it works out so it's the center both ways. Anyway, all that aside, he goes into all the sort of dynamics of the Earth core and the mantle and puts it up against this T handle, and it looks like the same. The density of the core seems to match this sort of T handle. And so he's like, it seems not out of the realm of possibility that this thing flips once in a while. And then of course this guy is like naval intelligence and be high up in the US government. And he's just sort of, I mean, it's pretty interesting stuff. And he's like, it's sort of the same thing. He's like, it's at the point now where the people that are around me and that I'm talking to, there's no way that they don't know. There's no way that in the paper, he spouts off a bunch of people at the end, and he's like, there's no way that this person, there's no way that these departments don't know this if I know this. And then, I mean,
that's kind of where I'm at with the liquid sun too. Like, so there's an approach to fusion that involves a solid substrate. And we've had a lot of NASA scientists on our show in the past. They will not talk to us about this work. Like, it is crazy how we just get blocked every single time. Like, we write to the scientists and they start a conversation, and then all of a sudden some NASA administrator pops in and just cuts the conversation off. Like, it's uncanny.
Wow.
Like, it's very, very, very bizarre.
And that's strictly about fusion, as in cold fusion, or
Well, like you notice how like fusion, they're always like, oh, we've made some huge progress, and then they're like, 10 years from now we'll have fusion going, but it's like been that same story since you were a little kid, pretty much.
With their $5 billion laser that just provided like a tiny bit of over unity. Meanwhile, there's all these people doing all these other experiments in the garage that are coming up with way better stuff. I mean, that's going to be the cold fusion thing is very strange because Rogan's mentioned it on his show a couple times. His guests have like that. You used to not be able to say that term, and now it's coming out enough that they're talking about it openly.
Well, there's papers like NASA.
Yeah, NASA has papers on this.
They have research groups.
It's literally a room temperature substrate where you basically just impregnate a metal with these deuterium, like these heavy hydrogens, and you use like a little laser pulse, and you let the lattice of the material do the work. And it's like, that's probably honestly, like, without building out an entire argument for this, like, that's probably how stars do it too. And so this is done at ambient temperatures. They've published papers on it, right? I mean, preliminary papers, but there's no way they don't know how this works. I'm kind of at the same point with this project where I'm just like, there's no way these people don't know how to do fusion effectively. There's just no way. Like, and the fact that everybody's just like kind of dorking around with these big magnet gas reactor things that are really expensive and always like just around the corner, we'll get it going soon. It just reeks of like statecrafting and secrets and trying to be the first one to the new technology.
Which I wish they would do already, like soon enough. Like, give us some new technology for some better energy, some cheaper energy. Come on. Which, I mean, some people are doing. I mean, I don't know if you guys have followed some of like George Howard stuff from Cosmic Summit last year. They had that Malcolm Bendel on there that talks about sort of like it's cold fusion. It's like plasmoids, which I was going to ask you because that sort of fits in with the cosmology or the astrophysics of the Kordylewski clouds. And I don't know if you guys have heard of that. These clouds that are supposedly these plasma clouds that are between the moon and the earth, and they've been rediscovered. They were discovered decades ago by Russian scientists, I think, or Czech, maybe, I can't remember. And then Robert Temple, his new book, or his book from a couple years ago or last year, was called The New Science of Heaven, and he talks about these clouds, and it comes into like plasma and the clouds being somewhat sentient. It's really, really fascinating.
That's wild.
Yeah, we hung out with Malcolm for a couple of hours one time, but we never ended up doing a podcast. It was a freaking wild ride of a conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, it was it sounded like a James Bond movie, like goes into Doctor Who, and
it's
it
too
was
much.
so bizarre.
It is. It's crazy. But it leads to some of the numbers that he's working with and some of the stuff like something's clicked for me with time and sacred geometry and all that. And I want to ask you guys this too, because have you ever come across like, and I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but time derive our aspect of time being derived from celestial mechanics and the sacred numbers that come from the repetitive sacred numbers that come from those mechanics?
Well, time almost certainly derives from mechanics, right? Because I think that the most simple way of thinking about time is just periodic motion of objects.
Right.
It's like a comparison of two motions, really. You compare like a known cyclic motion to anything else. You need a clock, basically.
So it makes sense that it would come from like, a second equals. It's just, I guess it's the number that, like when you look at I think it's the moon or the sun or the rotations, and these numbers keep popping up. The numbers that Malcolm uses, these sacred geometry numbers, like 144,000 or, 432 or, 816. And so it's these numbers that have been used also thousands of years ago, right? They're ancient.
That's what I was going to say. What's crazy about the second, if you think about it, like most people probably don't, I don't know if people think about this, but like, what the hell are we doing dividing our clock into 60 units when everything else is divided by tens and hundreds, right? And so you trace that all the way back to Sumeria, and they basically had this base 60 system instead of a base 10 system, and we still use it for some reason, which is so bizarre because we don't in any other domain. Like, we do divide the circle up by 6s. Like, what the hell? That's so freaking weird.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's just weird that we've held on to that little gem of all things.
And I think that numbers are really numinous, right? I said earlier that I was like really skeptical of mathematical explanations. And I think one of the reasons that I'm skeptical of them is because these sorts of symmetries, these repeating patterns, these reflections of numbers, they feel really significant, right? Like people for ages have been obsessed with the fact that, you know, the Platonic solids and these objects that you can make when you reflect things and you make tesseracts and you put them together and they create these weird shapes and they kind of nest inside of each other. And so I think that there is something unbelievably beautiful and numinous and almost spiritual about that, because you can also translate it to something like music, where harmonics are really powerful. And there's these crazy relationships inside of chords where you collect certain frequencies and it sounds like a major chord and it's happy, and you collect other ones and it's a minor chord and it's sad. And you're like, what the fuck is that? Why is that? And then you can take the same notes and you can put them in different orientations. Like you take C major, and it's when you start with C, it sounds happy, but then if you start the exact same collection of tones from A, it sounds sad. Like clearly there's something in those harmonic relationships that seems to drive at some core relationship that we have to nature. And there's this other guy that we know, Andre Gomez Emilson, who works at the Qualia Research Institute, where they've been trying to develop this mode for emotions and cognition that's on the basis of these resonant frequencies.
wow.
Where they're trying to build this thing that they're calling the annealotron, where they can put you into a machine that'll vibrate your body at different frequencies in order to imprint actual emotional states into the body, help you process emotions. And so I'm like, there's clearly something wild about that. Like our bodies are resonating, our minds are producing waves that have these harmonic intervals. And so we look out into nature and we see the intervals and we're like, oh my God, is that a reflection of us or of something that that's bigger than us, that we're a part of? And so,
and like planets do these same resonant tones, right? Like the orbits play out in these same ratios as the musical intervals. Like the ancient or the early scientists were obsessed with the music of the cosmos, right? They saw these like chordal relationships all over the place in the motion of the planets. And so there's absolutely something incredible and uncanny going on there.
yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, I couldn't give you most of the numbers off the top of my head, but we had Randall Carlson on, and he was going through the orbital time. And this is where I can get with you with the math. The math can get weird, but sometimes you look at the math and it's okay, well, something's going on here. Either someone's bullshitting, which I haven't ruled out. I haven't ruled out that all these like measurements that NASA gives us aren't just like they've made them up because they're occult numbers, and they're just like, you know what, they're just doing this math in the back room and spitting it out because they don't think anyone will ever notice, because you would have never figured it out on a fucking abacus. And then, you know, now we have all these sorts of things. But I mean, we went through like 6 different planets, and it was within 0.2% for a thing. But anyway, I mean, the easy one is just to go with the moon. Right, if we go with the moon and the Earth, I mean, so the moon takes 27.3 days to do a rotation around the Earth. Is that correct?
Sounds right.
In that neighborhood, yeah.
And it's 27.3% the size of the Earth. It's the Earth is 366% the size of the moon. It takes, you know, you start to see these are some of the numbers that.
But what if that's just like an inherent physical relationship? Like,
well, this is what I think might be the thing, because you can go down to where the sun will come down to the seconds in the day. And it's like, well, the seconds in the day has to do with the orbit time or with the rotation time of the Earth. So it's like, how is that factored into the fucking sun size? And when you go through all these numbers, you're kind of stuck with like, that's sort of the two things I come up with. It's either, okay, well, that's either like, that's the same sort of thing as the Earth ain't falling out of orbit. There's these weird sort of laws that we don't understand yet. And one of them is that the size of the sun is directly relative to how long a day is going to be on Earth, and sort of things like that. And that's what it seems to go down to. It's right down to the moon being like, what are the chances? I mean, just on the two coincidences. Let's just go 2 in a row. All right, that the moon is going to be 400 times smaller than the sun, but it's 400 times closer. So they're going to appear the exact same size in the sky, the exact same size. And then at the same time, that the moon is going to be 27.3% the size of the Earth and take 27.3 days to do a full rotation around.
What about the 108?
That's without even getting into that. I mean, because you start to get into those other things, and it's like my problem with once you get into the Earth things and the Earth orbits and that is once you get out to the longer measurements, I just feel like there's more room for that. They don't really, the measurements could be off. They could be off but the moon's right there. I mean, these numbers seem to be agreed on by everybody, and these aren't like, these now are numbers I'm pulling off the NASA website. I'm pulling them off of space.com. I'm not making them up, because I went through the stuff and I'm like, this sounds fucking nuts. So then I'll go and I'll start looking it up, and I've got the calculator up, and I'm like, holy shit, man. How that's the two things, right? It's intelligent design.
I think the ratios are really interesting because they don't depend on any particular numeric system. Like if you could convert those numbers into right, because like the Sumerians had a base 60 system, right? And we have a base 10 system. So like if you're comparing, like, I don't know if like 27% is a base 10 concept, right? If it was per 60 or something, per 60th or something like that, I don't know if that relationship would still hold. So it might just be an artifact of our particular cultural dependence on the decimal system. But if the relationship still played out as a ratio, that might be more interesting in the long run, because it would be independent of whatever cultural base system you had chosen arbitrarily throughout the evolution of your civilization.
And my question is, if you go to like Jupiter or Mars, do you then come up with a different set of like Martian numerology that relates to the orbits of its like weird potato moons and stuff?
I don't know, because I mean, here's the other one. So the moon on average is 108 times its own diameter away from Earth. Also, the sun is 108 times the diameter from Earth. That sort of, so I would argue that if this stuff works out, it don't fucking matter, because I'm not alive on Jupiter and nobody's alive on Jupiter, and that's if because of, like I said, it points to either some weird laws that we don't understand that make it possible to have life here, or it's intelligent design. So I mean, like Jupiter, it don't matter because we can't live there, which is kind of Simon's take on the stuff, is that that's why none of these planets we look at have life on them, because they're flying through space at 90,000 miles an hour. How do you have an atmosphere? Which is a valid point. I mean, I understand. I've watched all the stuff on why the atmosphere doesn't strip off, and it's just, but nothing ever just sort of peels some of it off, and then it's all gone.
Well, they do lose it, right? Like Mars lost it. Mercury doesn't have a very good atmosphere.
I mean, Neptune, Uranus have enormous atmospheres. Jupiter too.
Yeah, I'm like, I think that there is something there. I think that there is some deep significance to numbers and patterns. I just don't know what it is. Right? I'm like, clearly, like, there's weird shit. But you say intelligent design, like what? Like somebody designed the system and like plopped us into it?
I don't know. I haven't decided on who the designer is. I've just came out at the end of 1,000 interviews, and from atheism. I was an atheist when I came into it, and at the end of it, I'm just like, my stance right now is it's intelligent design. As far as how, why, is it intelligent design? Because that's just the laws of fucking nature, and nature. Nature itself is intelligent, so that's just how it plays out. Is it are we on a computer hard drive? Is it God? Is it gods? I don't know. It could all be in my fucking head, for all I know. Maybe I'm the intelligent designer, because to some extent I am. The further we look into the crazier the science gets, and the smaller you look down on it, and the observe, we definitely have some sort of control over this thing, or we wouldn't have to do all these different placebo things and jump through these hoops, because so I don't know. I couldn't tell you who I'm still reserved judgment on who the designer is, but I think that there's.
I mean, these patterns might also just point to like a really unique stability, and what you're looking at is a selective process by which all of the other possibilities were unstable, And these numeric relationships that you're pointing to, they point to some harmonic stability in the system.
Which does lead to it being a good place for life, because life,
The only place, maybe.
like you were talking about climate change earlier, and I'm always saying that I think most civilizations were ended by climate change. Like, you need stability. You need to be man-made or volcano-made or asteroid-made.
Like, have you seen Mesopotamia recently? It's not a great place to grow crops, you know, but it was an incredible place right after all the flooding.
I mean, I think my argument would be that it ends rather drastically and quickly, but I mean, I'm in the middle of reading Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel from Ignatius Donnelly in 1883. And I mean, the amount of myths and legends and the science behind the drift and you know, that looks like just cataclysms have happened. And so many myths talk about them, you know, coming back after the cataclysms, after they're hiding in caves or hiding and the sun's gone and it's all dark and icy, and then it comes back and the sun gets resurrected. I mean, so many of these myths all over the world talk about the destruction and resurgence of just a few humans out of caves, basically, or in the water. So it's pretty fascinating.
You got to think those memories would persist for a long time if something really terrible. And we know the human population has been strangled down to a few thousand individuals on at least one occasion.
Well, I mean,
the last one was 6,000 years ago, almost 7,000.
Which matches like the
Y chromosome.
The Chan Thomas. Well, it matches the Chan Thomas Garden of Eden thing. Like that might be like like when you look at that, the timeline from Ethical Skeptics paper there and Doug Voigt's thing and the Chan Thomas book, it's coming up to like we are entering into that time where it's pretty scary because the 6,000 years is up, right? I mean, what did you say it was 6,000 years ago down? I think so, right?
Well, it was the Y chromosome bottleneck. I think they're saying it was between like 4,000 and 5,500 BC or something.
Yeah, so there you go.
It was like 60,000 BC, but I could be wrong.
I think there's been a couple, but yeah, the one we're talking about was it was like right in that time frame where now it's like the next cataclysm is right around the corner.
I mean, bad stuff definitely happens on Earth pretty regularly. I mean, I think especially with the cometary impacts and stuff, the thing is most of the Earth is covered in water. So it's you know, it's not a big deal. There was a huge airburst not too long ago over was it Chelyabinsk?
Chelyabinsk.
Yeah, ask the Russian how to say it. So right, and that was not over a super populated area, but it did blow out windows. It sent a few people to the hospital. And then of course the Tunguska event, right? And that was over a forest, so who cares? But you know, if that happens over Manhattan, it's going to be a bad day in New York, you know.
So Neolithic.
I looked it up. You were going to say the Neolithic one?
Yeah, it was 5,000 BC, I think. So,
what was this?
The readout of it is really interesting, though, because I actually remember coming across this paper a while ago, and the readout is that all of the sudden the reproductive success of men changed dramatically, and it seems like the ratio fell to 1 man for reproducing with 17 women. As opposed to the 1-to-1-ish to the 1-to-5. So it seems like a male specific bottleneck.
It was a Mormon world.
Yeah. People are just like, oh man, shit must have gone really bad for a little while.
That almost feels like war instead of a natural cataclysm, right? I mean, men dying in war and the women being left to breed, basically.
Yeah, that's I think that's the if it was
a
cataclysm. That's their explanation for it. But that you have to figure out, like, if it is a Y chromosome bottleneck, maybe like all the men are at sea or something, or they have some kind of
So the problem is it happens on every single continent at the exact same time.
Really?
It happens on every single continent at the exact same time. So that's a pretty big war. Well, I'm not ruling it out, but that's a pretty big war. I mean, the explanations, I mean, it starts to mimicking stuff in the Bible, right? Where you get down to maybe it's like that because there's so few people left on Earth that you have to start looking at your breeding patterns. It's like you just can't. And this could be even where you start having like these things of arranged marriages and stuff like that, because it's like it's still a holdover from a time when it's like, there's like fucking 300 of us, man, and if we go there, or less, some of these tales say it was down to 40 women. There was only 40 women left. I mean, I think that's one of the culture stories, is that they were down to 40 women in the whole place, so they had to start doing this sort of weird thing. I mean, the Asia thing could be Genghis Khan, but that's a lot more recently, right? So
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I was looking at the press release, and it's like across Asia, Africa, and Europe for 2,000 years, the genetic diversity collapsed.
That's
It's
right. They
weird.
don't have and it includes Siberia, Europe. It doesn't have North America because we weren't, hanging around in North America at that time. But if you just look at North America, it sure seems like that's the case. North America is just the furthest behind in crawling out of whatever the fuck we're crawling out of, which makes you think that, it got hit harder than some places. But you start to look at, everyone's crawling out of something, right? There's ruins in China that are ancient. You got Egypt's crawling out of some shit. Rome's crawling out of some shit. There's just Teotihuacan. You got all this stuff down in South America. That's like, something happened. They had some shit. And, you mentioned climate change earlier. It's again, the same problem where it's like, well, that's big climate change if it's going to affect all these different places at the same time. And then you have these other weird things like that lake. Isn't that Lake Teotihuacan brackish? And it's up at like 17,000 feet or something like that.
Titicaca,
Yeah, it's like it's a big shakeup. It seems like an awful big shakeup. And to the point of that is North America. I mean, we're the furthest from crawling out of this. I think that there's probably some history. They start to find some stuff under the black mat layer, and that's, in Hancock's words, even that's getting pushed back further and further and further. But whatever happened in North America, it seems to have fucked it up pretty good. But
why just the men though? That's so freaking weird.
Well, I think that I don't, it just, if you go down low enough, if the numbers get down low enough, it's not as weird as, it's sort of the opposite way. Yeah, it's weird if there's a billion people on the planet, but if you take that down to hundreds or thousands, it starts to seem less weird, especially if you take it down to, there's 20,000 people left on the planet, but they're spread out over the whole place. So every place is little pockets of people with like, a couple of chicks and like 4 dudes. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to have, it's a weird game to have to play, but you can see how it gets played, right? We have evidence. Yet we know that we can't just be inbreeding or shit starts to get weird. So, you can get to the point where, you got to go Handmaid's Tale with that.
I was watching the comments and laughing because somebody commented, maybe the women got rid of all the men. All at the same time, all over the globe.
Yeah. They're like, we need to save a couple, damn it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this just goes to show that there's really crazy stuff that we don't really know how to explain. And the process of, we started with, Flint Dibble and the archaeologists and whether or not there's ancient civilizations that we don't know about. And I think that the tendency is to kind of maintain this appearance at all costs that things have been figured out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think that it's a lot easier for everybody involved if we're just open to the idea that maybe it's not figured out, and maybe it's okay if we speculate wildly, and that there shouldn't, like, Shilo always mentions on the show this thing called the strong link problem. We interviewed a guy named Adam Mastriani, and he wrote an interesting blog where he was like, I think that we shouldn't be freaking out about people coming up with crazy out there explanations for things.
He went even further and was like, I don't think we should give a shit if people are making up data and stuff, because nobody's going to actually end up referencing those studies eventually. Like, basically the good ideas float to the top, the bad ideas, who cares? Like, stop wasting your time on them, And he had a really, really thorough argument for why this was the case across time. And I think he's right.
Oh yeah, I like it because that's kind of what made me feel like when I was listening to your podcast. I'm like, this is like what science should be like, right? There's scientists discussing all these different theories, not in a dogmatic way, not like, oh, that can't happen because we already know that this is correct. Because you guys have also talked about the history of physics and all these things, and almost every theory that was supposedly the true version of reality has changed already over the last 500,000 years, right?
And brilliant people were maligned and trash talked in the newspapers. Like the one I've been hung up on lately is this dude Thomas Young, who basically he came up with the double slit experiment. He's just this brilliant dude. He worked on the Rosetta Stone, did all this music theory stuff, just complete genius. And he was just destroyed by the press in his day for, how dare he go against Newton, because Newton had this particle theory of light that didn't end up working out. And and Young was a champion of the wave ideas about light and electromagnetism. And he was just trash talked so brutally. Like, this guy is just a physician. He's not a real scientist. What a moron. It was unbelievable. And of course, nowadays, like, people kind of regard him as one of the most brilliant people of all time. So,
like, Thomas Young, I think you have to listen to this list of things that he developed in order to really fully grasp just how incredible this guy was. He came up with he proposed a wave theory of light. He studied elastic mechanics and came up with a mathematical equation that allowed you to characterize the stiffness and behavior of materials under strain. He had theories for vision and color theory and the physiological relationship between sight and optics. He came up with theories for capillary surface tension behavior. He came up with equations to model liquid dynamics. He discovered the function of the heart and arteries in relationship to the speed of the pulse. And he also translated the Rosetta Stone and he was a key figure in the decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphs.
And he spoke 8 languages, and that wasn't even his day job. Like, he was a working doctor his whole life. Like, that's what he did at night for fun.
Alchemist and magician too. When did he live?
He was in the early 1800s.
Wow.
It was a different breed back then.
But man, you should read these London Times articles about this guy just being, just this complete dumbass who just, how dare he even get involved in scientific discussions. And
I was gonna say, I mean, it seems like most of history is heretics. Like, all these big breakthroughs were heretics of their time. So it seems like we should be watching out for one of these heretics for the breakthroughs, because it seems to be these, like you said, they were all getting trashed at their time, and that with the person who's probably on it right now probably won't be realized until after they're dead. Seems to be, you'd like to think you move past it, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
go ahead.
No, I was going to change topic, so back to the other one. So keep going.
I was just going to say that makes sense, right? Because you wouldn't expect that really revolutionary breakthroughs would happen from within a tradition that you've ascended. You learned everything from your mentor and you got really good at it and climbed the ladder, and like, you're really good at maintaining the status quo. Like, those people are not going to be where you should look to for revolutionary ideas. That just doesn't make sense on its face. So
that's like society too, in my opinion. If you look back through, like, everyone talks about society as being this big thing that has advanced all these places, and I'm like, man, if you really look back just over the past like few thousand years, I mean, it all starts with Sumeria, which is this other weird coincidence that seems to line up with that Y chromosome thing, right? Like, our start of history seems to start right then too, and somehow they were melting stones and doing crazy stuff like that.
I mean, we had I forget who brought this to our attention the other day, but somebody was like, hey, I think this story we tell about the birth of agriculture being this huge, wonderful moment where people had all of this time to develop specialization. They were like, who was this? But they were like, I think this is actually a stress response. Like, was it Jim?
James Cook.
Oh, James Cook. It's like everybody's lifespan went down, their nutrition went down, their free time went down, their life satisfaction went down. Like, it seems like it was actually a stress response to something terrible having happened, where people needed to kind of,
eat more
survive along the old ways of living anymore. Like, something happened that forced them into cities and empires as opposed to living free.
The carnivore diet was destroying society. I mean, they had to eat more cereal. It's like, that's where they got that from in the early 1900s. Like, let's just get these men to lose their masculinity and eat more cereal. So there's I wanted to go back to the timing. There's a comment here from Curious AP Craig. The timing, continent to continent, of the Y chromosome effective population drop seems to indicate it's about Neolithic contact, disease, and war, at least on the graph from the study. And I was thinking about that. what if there was a catastrophe that then pushes all the populations together, and then the men, war, they're fighting over territory or whatever, and then the men would die. A lot of them die off, maybe if they're already losing much of their population to cataclysm, and then they're forced into these other areas.
I mean, you gotta wonder if you kill off 99% of the people in a society, like who makes it?
You go
who's
feral.
left?
I'll tell you who makes it. You go feral, and that's why you got 17 bitches per dude, because that's what happens. And like when if this stuff goes feral enough, it ain't 1-to-1 anymore. It's like the stag horse gets the other horses running around. None of these other mammals. There's a very few. I won't say none of them, but there's very few exceptions where it's not sort of an alpha with a harem. There's tons of mammals that are doing it that way. And it would seem like that's what humans do when left to natural development. Like we got Saudis doing this shit right now in 2025. So if you take this shit down to where we're like tribal in the bush, you cut out 99.9%, and you're back into that. You're down to feral. You still got the human this and that, but you're down to feral enough where it's like you're controlled breeding, and I think that's sort of what I was saying. That was my point of the numbers getting down low enough that it doesn't seem weird. I mean, one, you could be managing your society. The other is that's the way we're going to tend. If you go down to running around the bush, man, it's going to be, the little dudes ain't breeding for as much, it's just not the way it works. It's just not the way that it seems like it works in nature.
It's definitely not for chimps.
The bonobos are very friendly. Like the bonobos basically are matrilineal I actually don't know if they're monkeys or apes or what.
Chimps?
Primates.
They're
No,
basically
like
chimps.
they're very close to chimps, but I don't think they're chimps. I just
I think
finished
they are chimps technically. I could be wrong about that. God.
primates. I'll
No,
stick with
yeah, I'll
primates
stick with
because that works. They're matrilineal. They solve all their conflicts with sex. There's just like almost no violence. They don't fight over food. They're really welcoming. I think that it's interesting that there are other options, and you have to kind of wonder, is it possible for humans to choose a different way, or is this always just when they collapse they go down to this most like dark Mad Max super cruel world? I'd like to believe that it's
I don't know.
possible in the other direction.
It seems like not all of them went that way. I mean, that seems like one direction. I mean, I don't know what the Indians over here did, but their societies seem to be a lot more exactly what you're talking about. It was a lot more free forming, and there wasn't really, if you wanted out, you were out. There wasn't sort of the jealousy around stuff like that. A lot of kids, they didn't know who the dads were and stuff like that. So there might have been some semblance of that, but we got smoked when the war showed up, so I don't know if it was better.
Yeah, it's like I wonder if there's competition. Like sometimes I think about this really aggressive conquering mindset, and I'm like, well, it's gonna win any competition. Like if you have a group that's really peaceful and gentle, and then they're facing off with just some like bad motherfuckers that are just violent to the core, I'm like, who's gonna win that fight?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, think of that often in regards to freedom and tyranny and stuff, right? I mean, the people that want to be left alone are always at a disadvantage because you don't want to even like impose your will on other people, right? So we're constantly on the defense and not wanting to be offensive enough to even stay free. So I think that's like an inherent eternal conflict, which could be brought over to the sort of the freedom aspect of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like these dynamics are kind of evolutionary in nature too, right? Where you have, if you take, like, you asked at the very beginning, like other theories that we've come across that have kind of transformed the way that we think about things. And like one of the things that have really changed how I think about is evolution, where we have this mode of evolution which is just purely like fitness, like who wins in a certain niche. Who's the biggest? Who's the baddest? Who can take the food, the mates, whatever. And I think that's partially true, but I think that there's also this like huge cultural component, which is like, what do you choose to do? Like, you have all these options available to you. You have all these different lives that you can choose. Like, yeah, I can't fly, obviously, like there's a limitation there. I can't breathe underwater. But within the realm of human choices, there's things that you can choose to do that I think set you on an evolutionary path. And we talk all the time about how like humans aren't supposed to be evolving. But I look out onto the world and I'm like, yo, I think that there is this axis along which people are evolving, which is like bioconservative versus transhuman. Where it's like the bioconservatives are like trad life, back to the land, big families, low technology. They're not going to do embryo selection. They're certainly not going to do like genetic medicine. And then the like maximal transhumanists are the like Neuralink, body modification, let's go to space, let's go to stars, let's merge with the computers. And I'm like, that is a fractionation point, and that has nothing to do necessarily with fitness, reproductive fitness. It's literally people with the same genes that are looking out onto the world and they're like, this is what I like.
What causes the difference then?
I think that it's will. It's just like preference. I think that all
values really.
Like, what do you think is cool? Yeah, like what do you value in the world? Do you value farming, or do you value like sitting in the pod eating the bugs or whatever?
Yeah, but I feel like there's some. I mean, I've changed completely since the beginning of the podcast. So, you know, I probably would have been more on the who's that famous the famous technology guy that we don't hear a lot about lately.
Kurzweil?
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of talking about him at the beginning of it.
He's not even close to correct. That's
what?
That's why we don't hear from him. It's not fucking happening.
It's like fusion. Fusion's 10 years away. Singularity's 10 years away.
Yeah.
No, it's not, because fusion's happening. I don't think the singularity's ever fucking happening.
Oh, hot fusion's not happening.
I just feel like there's a bit of a social contagion happening right now as well. So how does that? I guess that's what my conspiratorial mind went to. Like, how is that affecting this evolution you're talking about? You know.
Well, I think evolution is not just genetic; it's mimetic as well.
Yeah.
Like the ideas that catch people and drive people and shape people they're just as powerful as genes.
Yeah, or a response to mimetics, or like a response to. Because I've gone back, like I've gone more from that sort of side in my own life to now to what you're talking about, like the more sort of natural being in a small town away from the city. Like that's kind of where I'm evolving towards, you know, becoming a hermit. Preferably in nature, but I'm not quite there yet. What's that, Darren?
It's like a weird sort of steampunk, because you also make your entire living on the internet. So it's
we're the same way, man. We're in the middle of we're in the middle of forests out here, but
that's awesome.
I don't know, but we spend a lot of time in cities too. Like we just can't live there because it's insane.
Yeah.
I like going to cities and just leaving. You know, I like showing up and seeing everybody and doing stuff.
Did you used to be a city guy, or?
Yeah, all my life. I mean, since I left home anyways, but I just, I really love leaving cities now.
How long have you been there?
We've been out in the middle of nowhere for about 3 years, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's very similar to my timeline too. Yeah. I was a city boy too. I was like, oh, this is my backyard. I mean, the city was the backyard, live in a small place. Now I'm like, I just don't like it.
What town are you in?
Little one in the middle of Saskatchewan. In the middle of the prairies, like basically, just flat prairie.
Wow, you went all in.
It's totally different. Yeah, I went from like the coast, but right on the ocean in Vancouver to Calgary in the middle of Alberta, and now to the middle of Saskatchewan. So
wow,
that's wild.
We're in Southern Oregon, but we are very far from big cities too.
Yeah.
Oregon. I don't mind Oregon. It's just fucking Portland. You guys have a Portland problem.
We were there for a minute too. Yeah, we left. We left right in the height of the pandemic. We're like, this is insane.
And it's a real shame. The first time I went to Portland, I was like, this place is awesome. It's like one of the coolest cities I've ever been to. It's like in the forest, the river's here. It's beautiful. I'm walking around, having a time. The second time I went to Portland, I was like, a little weird. And then the third time I went to Portland, I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. Because I was getting a tattoo, and Buddy was telling me about the dude he shot out back like 3 weeks before. And he's like, and you know, it was just like, and then we were walking back to the car, and there was some dude, some Antifa dude, like with a dog sharpening up, like polishing up his ball peen hammer. And I was just like, I can't bring my kids here. Like that's where Portland's at. I can't bring my kids here. And but the one guy's like, well, don't go over that bridge because that's the poo bridge. And I'm like, what do you mean it's the poo bridge? And he's like, well, that's the bridge that that everyone goes and they poo on the track so that when the train comes, it just, clears it all off. And I was like, man, one of the coolest cities in the world has inside my lifetime. And like in less than my lifetime, because I've only been traveling there for a decade. So it was like in 12 years, Portland just went from being one of the coolest cities to just being like what I picture the apocalypse to look like in some ways.
It's really gnarly, yeah. I'd lived in San Francisco, I'd lived in New York. I never saw somebody shooting up in broad daylight until Portland. Like in the grocery store parking lot,
More than once.
2:00 in the afternoon.
And it escalates quickly. I mean, the main thing that I noticed about Portland is it's like all of a sudden I'm at a red light and there's a fucking 1,000 tents beside me crammed in under this overpass. And it's like, in my head, I'm like, well, you can't judge just because they're in tent, but it's like, and they're like you say, they're shooting up. It's super sketchy. And it's like, fuck, man, like, when's this light going to turn green?
Well, Vancouver, I mean, it's happening to a lot of the larger cities. Vancouver's happened.
Yeah.
Same things happen to Vancouver.
I was in Calgary, like you can see it sort of coming where the winter will shake them out, but then in the spring they'll start coming back in. And we're sort of at that point now where we don't do shit about it either. It's just fine to live in a tent because we've destroyed the economy so much that, half the time you do go to kick that person out of the tent and it's not a junkie. It's just some fucking dude with a job trying to get by.
Yeah, because I always think about the Hoovervilles during the Great Depression, right? Like you see all these photographs of people that were displaced by the Dust Bowl, by the Great Depression. They're just traveling around. They don't have anywhere to go. They don't have any money. There's no jobs. It's like, I wonder sometimes what it would have been like to live through that time while still hanging on to whatever day job keeps you afloat, and then watching it kind of build around you. Like, did it feel different? Did it feel the same way? I don't know.
Well, it'd be weird because like I was reading a thing just not long ago. It was like, you got to remember that fucking 65%, like 2 out of 3 people were still working. So it's like for 2/3 of the population, life is somewhat normal, but for a third, it's like completely like, which is, doesn't seem like a lot, but if 1/3 of the population falls off a cliff, you got a major fucking problem. You got a, major problem.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
So
weird
what
too
about-
because it's sort of propped up on the basis of like caring for people, which is weird. It's like, leave them alone. They want to live that way. And it's like, I don't know about that. Like, I'm not sure they do actually. Like we got to know a lot of homeless people or former homeless people while we were in Portland, and I've had students in my class who used to be homeless, and it's a crazy scene down there, right? There's a lot of just predatory behavior, and it just seems like a really scary way to live, honestly, at the end of the day. And I'm not sure that enabling that is particularly compassionate, although it's often people acting to to perpetuate it under the basis of it being a compassionate thing to do, which is really strange and backwards.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's talking about that in where my mom lives right now, and they're like, well, it's their right. You can't take that away from them. And my mom's like, well, I can't just go park anywhere on the street, so how come they can just do what they want on the street? Like, it's a very strange thing, and they don't see that it hasn't worked in the last 10, 15 years. It's very strange.
I was allowed in a fucking restaurant a couple years ago.
So what about science? Dogmatic science, is that changing? Is that getting better? Do you guys see?
Well, we're changing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, you guys are doing a great job. Yeah,
I mean, we're trying to make stuff. We're not trying to, like, the podcast is part of what we do, but honestly, like, there's a pretty big underground movement. There's a lot of people who are in our space. We're putting on live events now, so we're doing this conference out in Portugal this summer in June, and we're bringing scientists. Like, we're bringing mainstream scientists, but we're bringing fringe scientists.
good for you. Wow.
We're trying to get like a legitimate conversation going, where people can't just kind of hide behind internet, handles and cast shots in the dark at each other. Like, we really, because it's hard to be an asshole in person, and so I think you can make a lot more progress with those kind of live events. So we're really stoked on that.
And the mainstream, is it harder to get the mainstream scientists there? Because I know, like, even though the Cosmic Summit there's some mainstream scientists, and I think it's harder to get them there when they know that there's going to be some fringe science as well.
I think the young ones are particularly interested. We've met a number of young, early career scientists who are kind of embedded in the academy, and
we've also selected hardcore academics that are more open-minded than the average, right? Like you can't have somebody like Brian Keating there. Like Brian Keating is, or Bill Nye, or Neil deGrasse Tyson. These people they're careerists. They're absolutely 100% going to toe the party line until the party line changes and they can toe some other line. And so you can't have those guys. But I don't think that those guys are really like focused on building some new thing. And I get really tired of the conversation, which is like, oh, the mainstream sucks and they're so dogmatic. And I look back through the history of science, like you go back to the ancient Greeks and there's the mainstream and then there's the heretics, and the mainstream is like the heretics are crazy and the heretics are like they're so dogmatic. And I'm like, Christ, we haven't figured this out.
At least we don't burn people at the stake anymore. That's good.
Yeah, like we've got a
We
little
just
bit
cancel
better.
them, and you know,
Yeah, just kick them off YouTube. But
yeah.
I'm just like let's build something. Like let's make a world that looks the way that we want it to look. Let's bring people together. Let's figure out these like mimetic things that really matter. How do we talk to each other? How do we encounter ideas? Like something that I'm really proud of that we recently started is this thing called Paradigm Drift, which we collect names all month. We basically put out a call where like anybody who's got a theory of nature, put your name on the list, and everybody who gets picked out of the hat has 60 seconds to present their idea. And then we do like 10-minute interviews with them.
Cool.
And it's just, it doesn't matter where you got trained. It doesn't matter if you got trained. It doesn't matter what letters are after your name. The only thing that matters is that you can define a problem, you can propose a solution to that problem, and then you can tie the problem to the solution in some linear way. Like that's all that matters. Can you do it? Great. Come. And I think that that's the future. Like the old guard is the old guard. There will be another old guard another 50 years from now, another 100 years from now. Like that is an archetype. And
It
so
changes funeral by funeral, so you might as well just make that faster, make the change yourself. So why Portugal?
a big part of our audience is in Europe, and we were in Austin last year for the Eclipse. Was our first conference, and it was awesome. But we just figured, you know, we would try something closer to the other part of the crew.
it's also a shockingly cheap place. Like I found a hotel for the event, and the event is in a town called Sesimbra, Portugal, at a 4-star hotel, like marble floors, infinity pool. Every single room has an ocean view, and the rooms are $250 a night.
Wow, that's great.
Do you know what I mean? It's like for the weekend after we're there, they're $400 a night.
Yeah,
And
wow.
so like we got a super good deal on this just like unbelievable venue. It's this like little medieval town on the ocean. And I was like, I wanted to have it in a medieval castle. But you would not believe how difficult it is to find a medieval castle that has 50 bedrooms.
Oh yeah. Darren, we were looking.
The biggest one I found was 30 bedrooms.
Oh, you were doing this too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we do events all over. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were trying to look for, we're doing a cathedral castle sort of tour with Randall in France and England maybe. But we're going to Portugal this year as well, to the Azores to search for Atlantis.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
When's that?
November.
Yeah.
November.
It's probably
Yeah.
a good time of year to go.
It's off
Yeah.
season. Yeah.
Just off season. Yeah, it works out pretty good. Yeah, and then we're gonna go to Easter Island, and we got another one coming up in a couple weeks. Yeah. So I mean, before we wrap up, so you guys are coming from the mainstream in some sense. What's sort of been the biggest sort of thing along the way, the biggest shakeup, sort of the hardest, sort of maybe not the hardest, but what's the biggest sort of thing you've learned to accept that maybe went away against your traditional training?
I don't know that it was, I think that we were so hungry for it, man. Like you spend all of this time with people and you ask them things like, well, what is charge? Why is this thing negatively charged? Like, why are electrons negatively charged and protons positively charged? And they're like, that's a dumb question.
Yeah, I think it was an everyday experience. Like since we first started working in the academy, all the way up to, I mean, I still teach at the university, and I still just can't believe I haven't gotten fired yet. Honestly, some days, like I'm in this huge lecture hall talking to these kids about like wild alternative idea. I mean, we teach the textbook too, but it's just you always feel that. You always feel it. You know, there's always this pressure to shut up and calculate, conform to the narrative. It's nothing
like being
new.
a bishop in the church back in the day, you know, someone's peeking over your shoulder to make sure you're saying the right shit. I mean, it's got to be a lot like that.
100%. And it's always been like that. And I don't know. I don't know. It's just been kind of a wild ride, honestly. I do think there are brilliant people in the academy doing cool stuff, and I got friends still who are at the top of that game, and power to them, you know. But we have hilarious conversations, you know, because they're interested in this stuff too, honestly, but behind closed doors. But you know, it's not part of the role that they play at the same time. So I don't know. It was just too closed-minded for us. We needed to do something wider and talk to more interesting people.
I think COVID was really heartbreaking, though. I think
Yeah.
that was maybe the most heartbreaking thing that's happened since we started this.
Yeah, we actually taught like an immunology course during COVID remotely at a couple of different universities.
Immunology
Of COVID. So we were reading all the primary literature, and so I think we were like among the first people in our peers who had the time and energy to read all this literature as it's coming out, and we were just like, wait a second, the stuff
the
that's
fuck
coming
is
from the
happening?
scientists
Oh no, really?
has nothing to do with
Oh,
the stuff that you guys are hearing on the TV. And
Let's
it was just starkly obvious.
whoa.
And so we're like, you know, we're walking these kids, these poor college seniors or whatever, through.
They were freshmen, and we were like making them read primary research papers. I don't think they know what.
We're like, you know,
what hit
PCR is
them.
not correlated to, you know, disease.
And they're like, "What's a PCR?" We're like,
was-
"Shut up."
It was hilarious.
Did you guys notice? Have you guys noticed the idiocracy creeping into that sector? I mean, I've sort of I've got a theory that we're running into a competency crisis in the West. I've sort of started noticing it across different sectors. I used to be in construction, and it became just over my 20-year career, the things that became worse. Like, you know, because I was always raised on this sort of upward trajectory of everything gets better and easier in this, and this might be a uniquely Canadian thing because I'm in Canada, which is
Are you
like
guys both Canadian?
we're both Canadian. Yeah, I'm in Alberta, so I'm like half. But
He's an Indian. He's a North American Indian.
Yeah, an Indian under occupation. But
wow.
There's
seems to
definitely
be
a
a
brain drain going on,
competency
right? Like people
Yeah.
are, especially I know, like I had buddies who were doing their PhDs in physics at the same time, and most of them went off to work for the financial industry. Like, what are you gonna do? You're really good at numbers. Like, are you gonna really suffer the, like, sort of tight, constrained, like creativeless environments future that you're staring down the barrel of, where you make, if you're lucky, you're gonna maybe touch the bottom of six figures by the end of your career or something, or you just go straight to work for Wall Street and make millions. It's like a no-brainer for most people. So I think there's probably a legitimate brain drain going on into the tech sector, into the financial industry, stuff like that. It's just more practical for most people.
I think there are exceptional people, though.
There really are, though.
Like,
for sure.
We have this one friend who is like a big tech guy, and he somehow found this kid who figured out how to manufacture semiconductors in his parents' garage using hardware store materials.
Wow.
And so now he has,
like, you guys have heard about like the chip shortages and stuff, and like Nvidia and all of that. Like, it's crazy because all our chips are made. We don't know how to do it here in America, right? And that's the story that it's too expensive and blah blah blah. But like, this kid figured it out.
and they're building a company in order to make like a tabletop semiconductor manufacturing facility so that it's like the size of, like a dining room table, and is like $50,000. So anybody who wants to be able to manufacture chips can buy one and then do them in-house. And so that lets you iterate instead of having to wait like 2 weeks from the moment that you send the tape out to the factory, and then the factory prints it and then sends it back. You can get turnaround in like 6 hours.
That's
And like, it's a kid who just figured out how to do this and then got like swooped up by tech. And I think that the future is maybe hardware rather than software. I think that software ate the world over the course of the last like 20 or 30 years. And so you have all these software companies. Like, do you guys use Zoom ever?
We do, yeah. Well, we used to. Not a lot anymore.
but it just like they kept adding features, and the
Yeah.
features made it like worse. And
That's what these
That's
sucks
what
do.
I've been complaining about with every.
That's
I've been
worse.
complaining about that with all the software stuff. I'm like, just stick to what you're good at. Stop it. Stop
we're
it,
so
you know?
old. We've turned into like the old man yelling at clouds. But
Yes.
I think that's like there's definitely like terrible things happening. Like Google sucks. The internet sucks. Like there's some kind of generator function towards things getting worse. But I think that that's what happens when all of your institutions fall apart at the same time. And I think that the only thing that you can do is you can build and draw people in order to make something new. Things die. It's okay. Like everybody dies.
Yeah, it's like
Systems
what
die.
comes next. That's really all I care about.
Yeah, I mean, there's even a big shift. Like I listen to these guys, the All In podcast. Sometimes I don't know if you guys listen to that at all. Very
I've heard a couple times, yeah.
very entrepreneurial, and they're talking about the software. How, like what you said, it's been this sort of this it's slowed everything down. Like all these corporations that got into Oracle and all these like software where they basically forced you to organize your corporations around the software, right? And now they're all kind of having to undo all that. And now that the software is changing and they're getting rid of middle management, and like it's just there is a revolution happening. You know, AI is probably going to be a part of it, right? It's going to be taking a lot of that non-value added administrative stuff away from people, and people can start organizing their companies the way they want to instead of based on the way the software is built. And yeah, it's really
Gonna make
fascinating.
it worse. Here's my theory. This is going to actually make it worse because we're going through this. I mean, we call it a brain drain. I call it an idiocracy or an Atlas Shrugged effect. I think it's very, very. I think Ayn Rand is probably what the most prescient fiction writer of the
We should
last.
start an Ayn Rand fan club. She comes up like twice a week.
We,
Oh, really?
we've read a number of Ayn Rand essays on the show. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't know that, but
there's a crazy like graduation address she gives to the MIT class
Yeah.
back in you know that one.
Yeah, I've
It's
read.
just like, what are you guys doing? Like you got to actually figure out what you want the world to look like,
By
and
the
not
end,
just
she
work
was
for the
losing it.
highest bidder. It's kind of amazing.
By the end, she was losing it, and you can see sort of why. I mean, I think the Fountainhead was probably if she could have made Atlas Shrugged the same length as the Fountainhead, it really would have been a banger. But I mean, it's still I think it's probably some of the best fiction ever written. And for that, I think she wins the dystopian one. You know, she really wins the dystopian novel because it seems to be the way we're headed. I don't know where I was going with that.
Brain drain, competence crisis, everything falling
Idiocracy.
apart.
Oh yeah, I think. I think
Producers are tapping out, man.
Well,
There's
here's the
gold.
thing: is that like everyone's an idiot. There's this problem where everyone's a fucking idiot, and I don't know, not everyone. Like you said, there's a bunch of people, but here's the thing: is we've got all these new tools, we've got the AI and all these things that make us, if you're paying attention, if you're switched on, you're 2, 3, 4, 5 times as productive as you were even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to sort of just cover over. We're going to be able to cover over this idiocracy until the fucking rug just comes out from underneath. And it's like, oh, wow, we thought that there was way more competent people running around than there is. But it turns out, I mean, you know what it is it's like you can see the Pareto principle in real fucking time. I feel like I've never in my life has that been more clear than it is right now. It's like you can sort of see that separation happening where it was all sort of all my life. It seemed like it was all blended together. And it's my same theory that all of society is sort of built on the backs of, you know, a couple of hundred people that were really fucking after it. They were really after it. And you know, they have these whole institutions that come up behind them, but it's really, you know, 1,000 people that fucking pulled us fucking ahead, kicking and screaming. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but I feel like
You'd really enjoy. Have you read the Robert Moses biography?
No.
It's called The Power Broker. It's about this guy in New York who was one of these guys. I think you'd enjoy it.
Cool. I'll check it out. I guess we should probably wrap it up. Do you feel like we missed anything?
I think we
We
covered
could talk
it.
forever, but
Yeah.
it's been fun hanging out with you guys.
Yeah,
this
it's
is
been
really
great. Yeah, it's been great to meet you, and yeah, maybe we'll see you at an event one day. And you guys aren't going to Cosmic Summit, or
fun. We have a wedding that
We're
weekend.
gonna try to make it next year.
Yeah.
okay, cool, yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we can catch up in person. It'd be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down in Oregon quite a bit. Oregon's definitely in the like circle. I like to do every couple of years. I do that circle over down 84, skip Portland, go to Seaside, and then down the coast, and then I'll go like dip into California and come right back up. And there's
If you
that
come
like,
through the like Rogue River Valley, like Medford, Ashland, hit us up.
Yeah, shoot us an email.
We're like 40 minutes off the 5, or
okay, yeah.
off of Medford.
Where can people find all your stuff?
DemystifySci podcast. Literally any place with a search box. I think even ChatGPT. Just type in DemystifySci podcast and you'll find us.
Right on, guys. Thanks for coming on the show, and come back anytime.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks,
Thanks,
Darren.
guys.
Thanks.
Peace out. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay, and that was a chat with Shilo and Anastasia. Is that what I say?
Yep.
Good one. What'd you think?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was a fun one.
Highly recommend, especially for scientists and people that are into all this science. But I mean, not even like, even I was, I'm not a scientist. I was enjoying it. It's very awesome. Their podcast. Check it out.
I don't listen to any podcasts anymore. It's a real thing. Actually, I listened to the All In. I've been caught up in that one that you mentioned lately. I've been listening.
Yeah, I've been pushing it your way. Yeah.
And I try and fit in the no agenda, but I mean, we're doing fucking 4 podcasts a week. How do you have time to do anything else at this point?
That's the thing. A lot of time.
Anyway, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Of course, we are still demonetized and everything else. So if you guys want to support us, head over to grimerica.ca/support. Due to the nature of the show, we can't work anymore. So this is all we have left. Is we've opened up our mouth too many times. So we podcast and do audiobooks and trips. So we need you guys to support us if you like it. Head over to grimerica.ca/support today. Sign up for monthly or make a one-time donation, and we will be thankful. We will read your note. If you send one, we'll love you. And if you do that to $1,000, you'll be a Lord of Grimerica. So you can check that out. Of course, contact at thecabin.com for those trips we were talking about. I got the email today for Easter Island. So I'm going to start putting that together and hopefully have something ready to go in the next couple months for next year. So that should be fun. There's some spots left for Bonneville next month and 2 spots left for Azores, like we're talking about. What else? Adultbrain.ca for audiobooks. We got a bunch of cool audiobooks over there. 153 as of today available on Audible. So check that out. Adultbrain.ca. They also have print books, ebooks, and we will help you publish your book. We got some publishing packages if that's what you're interested in. GrimericaOutlawed.ca for our controversial stuff. A-list.ca for Canadian political crap. And what else? I'm missing something. GrimericaCBD.com for CBDs and gummies and all that kind of fun stuff. Most of all, guys, support the show if you like it. And if you want it to stick around, head over to grimerica.ca/support today and help it stick around. Because if there's no support, there's no show. Also, yeah, Shilo and Anastasia also do value for value pretty much. I don't know if they call it value for value, but they don't do ads and they ask for donations. So it's great to just come across them and realize that they're doing a lot of the similar stuff that we are. So, all right, guys, there you have it. We love you. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.